Welcome to Livestream Deals. I'm Ross Brand. This is the second of two shows today. We had one earlier today, and we had a couple of great guests. Carlos Gill talking about the end of marketing, and Michael Kinney talking about his new video creator mastermind group. And now we have two more spectacular guests here in primetime. Jennifer Crawford will be joining us first to talk about DC Podfest, and then Mubs will be joining us to talk about Pod Hunt. So a heavy focus on podcasting events first, and then podcast discovery. Perhaps you can get your podcast in front of more people. We'll talk to Mubs about that. But I want to bring up Jennifer first. It's one of my favorite events that I've ever been to, DC Podfest. It's really taught me the love of the regional and local event. Jennifer, welcome back to Livestream Deals.
Oh, thanks, Ross. It's great to be back again. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, so I had an amazing time last year. It was so great having everybody close together, just a few different rooms going on. You got a chance to spend real quality time with the different attendees and speakers. What's on tap for this year, 2020, 2019? I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get the predictions for 2020 next time you and I talk. But for 2019 DC Podfest, what is on tap?
Well, it's our fifth year, so we feel a little pressure to really do something special, and I think that's coming together. I think we're going to accomplish that. For the first time, we have a VIP ticket this year, which includes a VIP party. And also a really spectacular kickoff party, which is for everybody, all the ticket holders. That's Friday night. Saturday, in addition to an incredible lineup of speakers, we have intensives, we have workshops. It's always important to me to have some interactive sessions so that people aren't just sort of sitting and listening and being talked at all day. I think it's really great if you can get some hands-on activities. So I think we've peppered the program with some of that. And then we added something that we're calling Expert Alley this year. And this is where we are going to have a big area with several tables where we're going to have subject experts stationed. So it's an opportunity for podcasters to meet one-on-one with these experts or in very small groups. So get really personalized attention. And a lot of our speakers are actually participating. So it's an opportunity to sort of learn from them in a broad spectrum sort of atmosphere, but then drill down with them one-on-one to see how you can apply what you've learned specifically to your situation. So I think that's going to be really spectacular. We have PRX Garage has come to DC. They did a grand opening at their studio facility in Washington, D.C. We've become friendly with them, and they are doing our podcast recording studio. So people will be able to record on site with the people that they've met, maybe a guest, or maybe they'll create a podcast, a brand new one on the spot. I mean, pretty much anything is possible at DC Podfest.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, there's attendees of all different levels. So you have people who are just getting started and need that extra boost to do their first few episodes. And then there are very experienced podcasters who are making connections and refining their skills. Talk a little bit more about that Expert Alley. I love the sound of that. What are some of the specialties that people are going to be bringing to Expert Alley?
Yeah, so we have some experts in general, like podcasting 101 sort of subject experts that are there for people who are, like you said, just getting started and sort of need all of those basic beginner questions answered, like where should I host? What's an RSS feed? No question is too small. Go ahead and ask them. It'll be kind of private, so nobody will hear you.
We've all been through those questions.
We've all been. I still have questions. I'm always learning. It's an evolving medium. But there will also be subject experts on branding, legal issues, marketing, social media, video, content creation, all sorts all sorts of experts, and we're still adding to Expert Alley. I'm kind of I've actually got to do a site visit and map out the arrangement of the Expert Alley, so I want to make sure we can fit everybody in comfortably. But we're sort of excited about that. And it's interesting. I was looking at the attendee list just the other day, and you mentioned it's a regional conference. We do draw people from outside of DC, but I think it definitely is showing the spirit of our area. I noticed the Secret Service has a podcast, and they are
Wow.
going to be at DC Podfest. The National Park Service has a podcast, or the National Parks and Recreation Organization has a podcast, and they're going to be at DC Podfest. So there are going to be some sort of big names and organizations there that are very DC centric. So I think it's going to be really exciting. It's such a mix of people doing podcasts, so that's always fun.
Well, the FOMO meter is just going off the charts for me. I unfortunately won't be able to make it this year, but I plan on being every year. I got to say that even though I can't go this year, I recommend DC Podfest as strongly as anything that I've recommended on this show. It is a tremendous event. I had a wonderful, wonderful experience last year. Who are a few of the speakers that you're looking forward to? Maybe some new names or maybe some old favorites who are coming back?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in terms of old favorites, we have Dave Jackson
Mhm.
back, and I think this might be his fourth year with us. And he's a real crowd favorite. He's really well respected within the podcast industry, but he's also just a super nice guy who
Yeah.
happens to be really funny. So he's doing a talk that he hasn't done at DC Podfest before. He's going to be talking about where you should actually submit your podcast, because
Oh,
it can be overwhelming, all of these directories that we can submit our podcast, and it can also be time consuming. So he's kind of going to obliterate the myths that you have to be everywhere, I think, and kind of really be honest about which directories are a good use of your time and which might be a waste of your time. So I always like that. We have Ebony Bell is our keynote. We just have one keynote this year. I kept it really simple, but
right.
Ebony is a local media company producer. She has Tag Magazine, which is a LBGTQ publication. She's really active. She's been a very strong voice for that community, both with her magazine and the related podcast. And so she's going to talk about how we can talk about and include diversity in our media, um, and not make a misstep by doing something called tokenizing, which I think it's an important subject for everybody, no matter
Right.
what you're putting out there. So I think that's going to be a really good start, and really kind of set the tone and sort of the depth of the content. We also have somebody who is talking about how to take the skill of podcasting that you have developed and expand upon it by becoming voice talent. So,
Oh,
how
wow.
podcasters can get paid by being voice talent in other ways. So, she's going to teach us about that. Her name is Dury Allen Neves. I'm really excited about that. We have Andrea Jones, and she is a social media expert, and she's going to be talking about taking the overwhelm out of social media. And when she applied to speak, I really that title really spoke to me, because it's something. Yeah, we run a monthly podcasting meetup, and this is a topic that comes up all the time.
Mm,
People, they know they need to talk about their podcast on social media, but it's completely overwhelming. And so
right.
she's going to help us, streamline it, but also be effective. Oh my gosh, we have so many speakers. I don't even know where to start.
I
Um,
assume my friend Rebecca Gunter will be speaking.
oh my gosh, yes.
She blew the doors off last year, and so I stayed in touch with her, and we've become good friends since then.
You did. Oh, she is a good friend of mine, and I respect her so much. She's on the main stage this year. She's
Oh,
going to
good.
talk about positioning your podcast, and that has a lot to do with how you position your brand. And she's also one of our subject experts in Expert Alley. So she's one of of these people that is super, super generous with her knowledge. And last year, she did some one-on-one branding guidance with our attendees, and they were blown away. Like, it was just, what the advice that she gave was game changing. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited to have her be involved even more this year.
Tell us about the venue. You picked such interesting venues last year in Arlington Spaces, and you have a new venue this year.
Yeah, so I like Spaces. Spaces is a co-working space, a really, decked out one, and very cool. But they were not available for events this year in 2019, so we had to move. So we're in the American Institute of Architecture building, and they actually do events there. So they're set up really nicely. They had, for me as an event organizer, they had
Right.
built-in audiovisual, and that's huge because we didn't have that last year, which meant it was quite a hefty expense for our small conference to bring in audiovisual equipment.
Right.
And it's also, since it's not built in, things can happen, things that go wrong. So anyway, so that's all built in here, nice and slick. And it's also a really cool building. It's 2 floors, and there's a 2-floor wall of glass. There's an outdoor courtyard, so which is sort of isolated. It's very private. So we have that outdoor space, lots of light. It's got a lot of character. Because we're a smaller conference, I try to keep us out of traditional like hotel conference
Right.
areas, and so we try to look for sort of non-traditional venues, because we like to give our event a little extra character by being in these interesting spaces. And we're fortunate enough to live in a major city with lots of interesting spaces. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it really makes the event memorable, having a space that's different from typical hotel ballroom or hotel conference area. We're talking with Jennifer Crawford. She is the founder of DC Podfest, which is coming up in early November. Tickets still do remain. We had wanted to do a giveaway, and so if you're interested, Jennifer's giving away one ticket. Go ahead and throw in the chat what you're doing with podcasting or would like to do, why you think you could benefit from attending this event, and later we'll go in and we'll pick one lucky viewer to have an opportunity to go to DC Podfest. And also, Jennifer was nice enough to bring a special offer for our Livestream Deals viewers to save $40 on tickets, and you just use Ross Fan, ROSS FAN, ROSS FAN, and you can save $40 on your ticket to DC Podfest. So thank you so much for your generosity, Jennifer. What do you think are the hot topics now in podcasting? Each year, we always talk about podcasting on the rise. How are people going to monetize it? What's kind of hot and different this year from perhaps past years, that people, there seems to be a buzz around in the industry?
I think, this has always been a hot topic, but I think it's just keeps gaining steam, and that is monetization.
Right.
People are very curious. Of course, they've heard success stories, and they just, they have such a passion for the medium that it's, a dream come true if they could actually monetize doing something that they love. So there's a lot of questions. I think the scope of how to monetize has broadened, and interest in podcasting from corporate or business America has also broadened. And so I think there are more opportunities. Um, with that said, I think you also have to be realistic. I think most
Right.
podcasts are not going to make a lot of money. So we'll see. I think it's going to be an interesting, I think how things are developing are really interesting. And I think it's also I think it's also resulting in better content. I
Yeah.
think podcasts are really honing their craft and taking it more seriously. It was so kind of punk rock and sort of underground for so long, and now that it's, quote unquote, getting the respect it deserves, I think now it's people are, there's a new respect
Mm.
to the medium brought to the table by both the creators and, say, the financial supporters, like the advertisers.
With the growth of corporate podcasting, have you noticed opportunities coming along for independent podcasters, or are you seeing that corporations are either using their in-house talent or hiring, more established media personalities?
I think there are some opportunities there for sure. You might not know this, but I work very closely with companies on behalf of Podbean for internal podcasting.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm actually, well, I can make an announcement here, right? I mean,
Okay.
it's a
Oh,
soft,
we love to
you're
break
like,
news.
okay. I mean, I didn't plan this, but it just kind of came up naturally in conversation. So I'm planning October 1st, 2020. This is a soft announcement because things still need to be ironed out, but I'm producing another podcasting conference. It's called Podcast Inc.
Okay.
And it's going to be all about internal podcasting. So, podcasting within the realm of corporate America, how they're using podcasts to improve communication, internal training, micro learning, and employee engagement. So it's really actually exciting
Wow.
what's happening internally. And in terms of promoting content and producing content, uh, there are a lot of the same, a lot of the same infrastructure and needs are there, but there's it's a very closed ecosystem.
Right.
So, and then of course, a lot of those companies are also producing external podcasts. So that's their marketing arm. And some of the bigger ones are being very creative. They're using storytelling and all sorts of creative production so that it's not a commercial, it's actually entertainment, but it represents their company in such an interesting light that the byproduct of that podcast is increased, business and really great marketing. So I think it's actually a topic that I
Fascinating.
just love so much. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking in several levels, both from the marketing side, but also I have an HR background, so I'm thinking about the
Mhm.
internal podcasting and employee engagement and all those areas. So it's fascinating, and I
It
can't
is.
wait to hear more about it and see how it develops. Thank you for mentioning it. You heard it here first.
I know. Well,
It's
now I really have to make it happen. So
podcast
October 1st,
Inc.
2020.
Podcast Inc.
Podcast Inc. Yeah, it's going to be a one-day conference, obviously for corporate America who wants to learn how to produce an internal podcast and all the benefits of internal podcasting. So it has some great advantages because it's a closed ecosystem. We're able to provide data on the individual user, so we can tell you how each individual listener is interacting or engaging with each piece of content. So
Wow.
companies can take that data and correlate it to the success of sales initiatives or training programs. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
That's terrific. That's so fascinating. Well, DC Podfest, you know that she's on top of what's going on in the industry. Jennifer Crawford runs DC Podfest, and it's a wonderful event again in November 1st and November 2nd, I believe.
Yeah,
Right.
November 1st, the evening, and then all day November 2nd. You're going to be exhausted by the end of it. But guess what? It doesn't happen on Sunday. We purposely do not book anything on Sunday because we want people to have time to rest and absorb everything and also get home to wherever they're going. So,
Do their vlogs afterwards.
well, or just enjoy the city. I mean, DC is this venue is very close to the White House. It's right in the thick of things. DC, save some time to visit the city. All of our museums and our zoo is free. Take advantage, and it's just a beautiful, amazing city to visit.
Well, terrific. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's DC Podfest. You can save $40. Ross Fan as one word, ROSSFAN, for tickets to DC Podfest. And you can find all the products and services that we discuss on Livestream Deals on the homepage at livestreamdeals.com. You'll see this towards the top, and you can click on through take a look at what's going on with DC Podfest and get your ticket. It's a great event. Thanks, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you so much, Ross. Talk to you later.
Great talking to you. You are watching Livestream Deals. I'm Ross Brand, and it's the second of 2 shows today, and we have one more guest coming up today, and I'm so excited to bring Mubs into the picture. Welcome, Mubs, from Pod Hunt.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me on. Let me spend some time talking about Pod Hunt.
Yes, it's so great to have you, and you have so many different projects that you've worked on over the years. Can you introduce yourself to folks and just give a quick background of your story and your experience?
Oh yeah, I've been in the industry. I started to write code when I was about 8 years old, just playing on the computer my family had at home. That turned into a hobby while I was at school. That turned into computer science for university. And then ever since, I've been working in the software development and the web development industry ever since. So for about 22 years now, I've been a software professional.
And Mubs makes things. Let's just say he was Product Hunt's Maker of the Year. Excuse me, for 2016, runner-up in 2015. I believe the Maker of the Year or the runner-up in 2017. Let's just say every year he's amongst the leaders and making things. The king of the side hustle, you could say. Before we get to Pod Hunt, what are a few of your favorite projects that you've done?
Probably the one that other people might have heard of in passing. A few years back, I built a website called "Will Robots Take My Job?" And it was a site that I built with a friend from Bulgaria, who I've never met, but somebody I met online and somebody that I became friends with. It's a website that gave people the ability to search for a job. So accountant, school teacher, kind of anything, any kind. I think there was about 750 jobs that some researchers in Oxford University had studied and said, this is the likelihood that in 2023, this job will be automated away through AI and robotics and kind of things like that. So you just punch in your job and it would tell you there's a 20% likelihood that you will not have a job in 2023.
Wow.
So that one was actually really popular. In the first week that we launched it, I think it had 4 million page views and had been mentioned on TV stations and radio stations all over the country.
And when you develop these different projects, are you doing them solo, or do you have a team or a collaborator, a co-founder? How are you coming up with the ideas and doing the actual development?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've done, I think at last count, it was 85 side projects over the years. I would say about half of those I've built kind of on my own, just because it was a project that I wanted to make and wanted to make exist. Other ones I kind of do tend to work with other folks, and they can have all sorts of backgrounds of people that I work with. They can be designers, they can be marketing people, salespeople, all sorts of different kind of. They have the idea and they come to me and say, I have this idea. I don't know how to turn it into a website or web application. And I said, well, that's something I can do because I know how to do that. And then we kind of work for a few weeks and we kind of iron out kind of what that will look like and kind of how it will work and stuff. And then I spend some time in weekends and evenings and things like that, and just kind of hacking away. And after a few weeks, hopefully we'll kind of have an application that we can start to share with other people to see if they like the idea as well.
Well, it's so fascinating, all these different projects that you've worked on and how they've come to be. Our focus tonight, we have Mubashar Iqbal with us. He goes by Mubs, is Pod Hunt, and it's helping people get their podcast discovered. And instead of focusing on shows, the discovery goes around episodes. Tell us where you came up with the idea for Pod Hunt. I understand it has a long history, and yet it's a new app.
Yeah, so the idea is actually, so Product Hunt, which I'm a big fan of, used to have a podcasting category on their actual site. So as well as submitting applications that you use and web applications that you use, you could also submit video games and books and podcasts as well. And so they had that on their site probably about 2 years ago, but they wanted to focus on the software world and kind of applications and things like that. So they shut down the idea of submitting other things. And so the idea has always been, well, it would be nice if we had that, if that thing still existed. And that was, like I said, I think they shut that down about 18 months ago. And so ever since then, not just myself, but people that I kind of hang out with online, people, and some of my friends, would be like, well, it'd be nice if we had that Product Hunt experience about how you could submit things and upvote them and sort of that kind of stuff. And I was in the city in July. I was in New York City, I should say, in July, hanging out with some friends at a conference, actually, and the idea of well, we should make that, make it happen again. So on the train ride home, I started working on Pod Hunt.
So how's it going so far? I mean, it's relatively new. Tell us what the experience has been like so far with Pod Hunt.
Yeah, it's so yeah, I started working on it, like I said, just about, I was on July the 25th, so it's about 8 weeks old or so. It took me about 2 weeks to build the initial application that I could start to share with people. So we've been alive.
Talking about quick time to market. Oh, we need an app. Okay, 2 weeks. Here we go.
Well, that's one of my specialties. Like,
right.
Just what's the bare minimum that I can build and launch? So that's kind of my I guess you call that my expertise as well. So it's been live for about 6 weeks, and really the response has been awesome. Everybody who finds out about it is like, where has this been? Like, why has this not existed since the podcast started? Right. So that kind of stuff. Yeah. So right now we're still early in the story. Like I said, only about 6 weeks old, but we're still seeing about 10 or so podcasts being submitted every the day that people upvote. And then we kind of have a daily leaderboard of the episodes. So rather than you just as you'd mentioned, rather than just focusing on an individual podcast, we actually focus on the individual episodes that you submit. And so what that means is that every time you come back to the site, if you come back tomorrow or the next day, you'll see an entirely new list of episodes. So you're not going to see the same 100 podcasts on every kind of leaderboard that you see, because right. even if you see the same podcast, you're going to see a new episode from that podcast as well. So hopefully you'll find something new and interesting that you may not have heard of in the past as well.
Now, both going back through the Product Hunt iteration of this and now with Pod Hunt app, and you can find it at podhunt.app, and there's an online website that you can take a look around and see the different podcasts. Is it more other people submitting the podcaster, submitting somebody's podcast, or is it the podcaster themselves throwing their episode into the ring?
Yeah, it's been funny because obviously I've been trying to spread the word, right? Like, I'm trying to get as many people interested as I can. So at the beginning, it was me submitting everything because I had to. But it's been interesting to kind of see, because every time every time I submitted something, or every time somebody else submits something, I do ask some information. So who's the host of the podcast? Who's the person? If it's like an interview, like we're doing, who is on that podcast as well? And then I tweet out who, what the podcast is, who the host was, who the guest of the podcast was. And it's been interesting to kind of see that as I tweet those out for the future episodes, the sort of hosts and even sometimes guests will come back to Pod Hunt and say, I was on this other episode as well. That was really awesome. So they kind of submit that as well. So I'd say right now, I'm probably still submitting about 10 or 20% of the episodes. I'd say another 20 or 30% are coming from the sort of hosts themselves. But I'd say at least half of the episodes are still coming from people who are just fans of the episodes.
Oh, that's great. As that happens more and more, it really opens up the doors to people discovering new content and new creators, new hosts getting some visibility in the wider community. What do you think are the next steps for Pod Hunt? Do you have plans to monetize? What are you looking for as we go through Q4 of 2019?
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to monetize because it'd be nice to actually be able to pay for actually working on something like this. But I think my main focus for 2019 is still just to kind of grow the audience, grow the sort of activity on the site. So just get as many people in submitting episodes as we can and uploading episodes and doing all that stuff. If a podcast host wants to be a supporter of what we're trying to do, they can. It's only $25 a year. And for that, you'll get a little badge next to your podcast every time it appears on the site somewhere. So kind of everybody knows that you're a supporter. We kind of also, we do enhance your podcast page as well. So we'll, automatically add the links to Spotify and iTunes and Google Podcasts, all the popular players out there, so people can instantly link to whichever application they happen to use, kind of things like that. It's still a small little way for us to say thank you for being a really early supporter. After that,
people who want to support, they can do that through the website.
Yeah. So yeah, if you go to podhunt.app/supporters, you'll see a list of the current supporters, and there's some more information there about how you can become a supporter as well.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like a fantastic deal, really, to support what is a great app and a great website for the podcast community and for podcast discovery. Talk about when people come to the website for the first time and maybe they'll feel a little overwhelmed. They see different categories. They see episodes. What's the best way to start using the website as a visitor coming to it for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I really like about Pod Hunt is the randomness of what you see on the homepage, right? Like you come and it's just this random assortment of whatever somebody submitted. You might have something about marketing. You might have something about kind of entrepreneurship. You might have something about mind, how to improve your well-being as well. So yeah, just kind of embrace what you see. It may not be something that you're really looking for, but if you spend 5 minutes and kind of listen to it, you might find something that you're like, well, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So just that randomness of just finding something that you may not have thought that you were interested in, I think is really awesome. If you're looking for something specific, obviously, yeah, we do have some categories that you can filter down and kind of say, okay, I just want to see stuff about sales and marketing, or I want to see stuff about sports even. So we kind of have all those different categories within the application as well that you can kind of filter down, and then just kind of scroll. I mean, like I said, just kind of explore a little bit. You might we kind of, like I said, we segment it by the day that the episode was submitted to Pod Hunt, so it's very easy to see what was submitted today, what was submitted yesterday, and what was popular as well, because as the episodes get upvoted, they appear higher in that list for that particular day as well. So it becomes a natural way to see, okay, what was popular instantly just by looking at what was at the top of the list itself.
which podcast categories have been the most active, and which you looking for maybe some extra submissions to generate more activity?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, most of my friends and most of the people I know from online and even in the podcasting industry are people who like to make web applications and to do kind of like the side hustle thing.
Right.
So we've had a lot of episodes around starting a new startup or starting a new side project, so sort of those kind of things. So there's lots of that. So if you're kind of interested to hear about the story, even of Pod Hunt, you'll see there's a few episodes that I've been on where I talk a little bit more about the sort of history and kind of how I started it and sort of that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, really, if you're just interested in this whole idea of kind of startups and kind of how they work and how people start on them and work on them, there's lots of episodes kind of about that stuff on there. Outside of that, like I'm interested to see what other people are interested in as well, right? So if there's a podcast that you listen to that you thought was a really awesome interview, it could be with somebody who writes a book, it could be with somebody who's a sports, who's an athlete or something like that, or just somebody from some industry as well. As long as it's an interesting story that other people might find interesting as well, that's kind of what I like, the sort of randomness of finding stuff that you wouldn't normally that you wouldn't find anywhere else.
Yeah, we're talking to Mubs about Pod Hunt. It's podhunt.app. You can also find it at the top of the homepage at livestreamdeals.com. Check it out. It's great for podcast discovery. I'm curious, Mubs, you've been obviously working with so many different products, and it's given you exposure to a lot of different industries. What's something, since you've been working with Pod Hunt, that you've learned about the podcasting industry, or that stood out for you about podcasting, that maybe you wouldn't have come across if not for doing this?
No, I mean, I think the most interesting thing is that it really does feel like the first time that people actually have a voice and they have access to a place where they can actually share that as well. I mean, I think, obviously with things like TV and radio, people want to be on TV and radio and things like that, but you really can't. Yeah, there's very hard to access that, right? So I think with podcasting, everybody who has a story to tell now really has a way to access a way to kind of tell that story as well. And I think, and to do it affordably too. Like if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you can record a podcast and you can post it, and really it won't cost you anything at all to actually host and have access to an audience as well. So I think just seeing all of the different kinds of people who are starting to tell their stories, I think to me is really interesting. I've been a fan of podcasting for a while, but it's been really interesting to see now that people are saying that podcasting has been around for a number of years now, but even now there's a number of people who are just starting now is still amazing to me, I think.
Yeah. So this is very exciting. It's a new app. It's called Pod Hunt, and it's podhunt.app where you can find it. We're talking with Mubs, Mubashar Iqbal. I should have just stayed with Mubs, but I'm working on it. And we appreciate the first time on the show on Livestream Deals. And as you look to the future, do you see that smart speakers, Alexa, Google Home, that's going to become part of the mix, and that content could also have a home within Pod Hunt, like flash briefings and Google updates?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. Well, I think it's going to be interesting if podcasts get shorter as well. Like I saw this big trend of, they used to be an hour long, they're coming down to about 40 minutes long. And I think we'll continue that trend where they're going to get a little bit shorter as well, just because I think they just fit into people's lifestyles a little bit easier as well.
Right.
And I think things like Spotify making a big move into podcasting, people like iHeartRadio making a big move into podcasting as well. Just people mixing media now. Like you can listen to a song on Spotify 1 minute, and then we listen to a podcast so the next minute. I think will be kind of interesting, as people start to mix those playlists. And I think it will actually become like the online radio that people promised us. But
right.
But I think now you're actually going to have these segments that you can stitch together yourself. You can have some music, have an interview, have some more music, have interviews, and you can actually build your own entertainment the way that you haunted, I think.
Yeah, like an old-fashioned full-service radio station. You get 2 songs, then you go into an interview,
Yep.
you come back, you listen to some comedy, and then another podcast, and then you go into some songs.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you can walk from your car, and then like you said, you can be on your Alexa at home, and then you can turn on your stereo, or you can listen to it online as well. Just having access to all of those things from wherever you are, I think it's really an awesome idea as well.
Now, is there any length of time that's minimum or maximum to submit a podcast? Like, if you have a 1-minute podcast, can that episode be submitted?
I mean, I've tried not to put too many limits on these things. I mean, obviously, it's the sort of upvoting and things will tell you whether it's
Right.
a good idea to hear it or not, right? Like somebody's going to go listen to it, but like I just wasted a minute of my life. But yeah, but that's okay. It's just a minute, right? So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, I right now I haven't imposed any limits into even though we're looking for like newer episodes because the site is so new. If you submit an episode that's 6 months old, that's okay because we just want some really good podcasts on there. So even if it's a 6-month-old episode, that's absolutely fine. If it's an hour long, I think the longest we've had, I think somebody submitted I think it was an hour and a half long one recently. But if somebody wants to listen to it, if it's that awesome, then absolutely submit away.
Well, we're talking with Mubs from podhunt.app, and thank you so much for spending some time. Most of the products that we feature have price tags on them. This one doesn't. It is absolutely free to use, but it is off to a wonderful start. It's high quality, and we think it's worth the attention of podcasters, podcast listeners, fans of podcasts. Check it out, podhunt.app. You can also become a supporter. It's $25 for a year, but it's not required in order to use the website.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if somebody's starting a podcast right now and they don't have any audience, and I'm happy to support people just like people are supporting me. So if people want to, I don't know how you organize these things, but if people want to share the podcast that they've just started and they don't want to spend the $25 to be a supporter, I'm happy to take one of those and kind of make them a supporter as well. So however you want to run that, I'm absolutely open with that too.
Well, consider that a special offer. Mubs, it's great meeting you, great chatting with you, and congratulations on all these great apps, and particularly this one as the podcasting, live streaming, content creation discovery is continuing to improve and taking a major leap forward with Podhunt app.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. And yeah, and if anybody has any questions or anything like that, you can reach me on Twitter as well. And there's lots of information sort of on the site about how to reach out as well.
Well, thank you so much, Mubs from Podhunt app. It's podhunt.app. And you can find out more information about that and all the products we feature here on Livestream Deals, livestreamdeals.com. Also, we talked with Jennifer Crawford, the founder of DC Podfest, and she has a special offer. If you're interested in attending DC Podfest, you can save $40 using ROSSFAN, ROSSFAN, one word, and save $40 at checkout. You can find the link to getting your tickets by going to livestreamdeals.com. So end of a doubleheader here of 2 back-to-back episodes of Livestream Deals. And we want to thank all of our guests. Earlier today, we talked to Michael Kinney and Carlos Gill. And now we've talked to Mubs and Jennifer Crawford. We thank them all. And we thank you for joining us. And before we wrap up, let's take a quick look at the chat. We haven't had a chance to check in with the chat yet. Let's see what's going on LinkedIn if we can, and some of the other platforms to take a quick look and check out what's going on over there as we move into, let's see. Not seeing anything coming up through the Restream dashboard at the moment. So maybe, let's see. Says the chat is waiting for new messages. Because I was doing this podcast style, I think maybe I had to open that dashboard before the show. So that's something to know for the future as far as engaging with the chat. If you're using Restream, open that chat dashboard before, even if you're recording a podcast and don't plan on bringing in the comments until after the show is over. So we learn as we move along here on Livestream Deals. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I'll follow up in the comments on the various platforms, and any questions that you have, I will answer in the chat or pass along to our guests. And thanks again for joining us on another episode of Livestream Deals. Take care, everybody.